This video explores the meaning and operation of one of Crusader Kings 3's most basic distinctions. It's mentioned in the tutorial, though not in a wholly substantive way, and I keep seeing questions about it on the various Crusader Kings subreddits and on my livestream, which you can find at twitch.tv/resorty, link down in the description. In what follows, we're going to explore the de facto de jure distinction. Paying attention to this one will help you better understand a lot of what's going on or could be going on in your playthroughs, and it'll make you a hit at parties too, promise. Before we get to the game, let's start with the terms themselves. Find your pocket protector and put on your theory glasses, because welcome friends to Big Nerd Time. De facto and de jure are both medieval Latin terms, which you can tell from their fancy italicization. Their translations aren't easy enough. De facto means obviously, in fact, and de jure means by law or by right. Consider here the English word jurisprudence, meaning the study and theory of law. These terms share a common etymological root. A state of affairs is said to be the case de facto just when it's actual, even if it shouldn't be. On the other hand, a state of affairs is said to be the case de jure when it should be so, because it's legally prescribed to be so, even when it isn't the case. Maybe that's all too abstract though, so consider Tom. Legally speaking, this house right here is Tom's. He's paid off the mortgage and is the owner. He sleeps here, he gets his mail here, and he's registered to vote here. We can say that Tom is both a de jure and de facto resident of this home. He's legally understood to live here, and he should, and he does. One day, Tom decides to go on a week-long vacation. He asks his good-for-nothing brother Roger to look after the house, and Roger agrees. As soon as Tom's out of sight though, Roger moves all of his things into Tom's house, changes the locks, and sets to redecorating. When Tom gets home, he tries his key, and upon finding it doesn't work anymore, rings the doorbell and asks Roger what on earth he's done. Roger responds, "Go away, Tom. I live here now." Does he? There are, of course, multiple ways to answer that question. One is from the perspective of actuality. Yes, Roger does live in Tom's house de facto. As evidence, see where Roger's been sleeping for the past week. See that Roger's in the room. See that the walls are covered in Roger's totally sick Pantera posters. Roger is a de facto resident of Tom's home. But perhaps this answer leaves you with a niggling feeling of doubt. At the top, doesn't it still say Tom's house? What about the deed? What about Tom? What if Tom calls the police? All of these questions push us to a different lens of analysis, and that is what is the case de jure. What it means to live somewhere de jure is not just about where you lay your head or where you happen to be standing, but instead where you're legally permitted to be. It's about deeds and leases and where you pay your taxes. While there are certainly reasons to doubt the ultimate rightness of this de jure analysis of home ownership, right or wrong, it's what the law prescribes. Some viewers may be just ahead of me here. Don't laws differ on what it means to own things or to live somewhere? Why should we prefer one analysis de jure over another? These questions point to a common thread. A legal analysis always assumes some authority that sets the law. More on that in just a bit. As we come to the end of this opening excursus though, one last thing. I can imagine some of you setting your Cheetos aside, licking off your fingers, and reaching for your keyboard. Actually, Resorty, as the term is Latin, it should be pronounced de jure. Sure, fair, but this video non-Latine, ergo Romanus eunt domus. To sum up, for our purposes, it's enough to say the de facto analysis tells us what is, while a de jure one tells us what legally should be. Now that you're ready for your philosophy of law class, let's figure out how this key distinction operates in CK3. If we return briefly to the safety of Tutorial Island, we learn that all titles are made up of certain land de jure. From the duchy title view, we see the starting petty kingdom of Munster is made up of the territory of 3 counties, Thomond, Ormond, and Desmond. But if we move to the realm view, we see that Munster is currently in control of only the former 2 of these, Thomond and Ormond. In this shift, we come to a concrete example of the de jure de facto distinction. The ducal view shows us what the duchy or petty kingdom of Munster should be, that is, de jure, while the realm view shows us what Munster currently is, de facto. The first way in which most new players run into the term de jure is as a CB, an abbreviation for another Latin term, casus belli, this one meaning a reason for war. Think here of the English words cause and belligerence. CBs are a common mechanic in Paradox games. They're one way the developer stops players from constantly expanding, rolling through their neighbors and blobbing unstoppably. With no reason for war other than I want that, the game won't let you march your troops to seize land. Instead, you need a CB, a reason for war. When the tutorial instructs the player to declare war on the Earl of Desmond, it's encouraging the player to bring legal Munster and actual Munster into harmony as one increasingly large realm. It's asking players to use a ducal de jure casus belli. The player has this CB because they began the game as the Duke of Munster. By using a de jure CB in war, the victor will make the war target's current title holder a vassal, if it's possible to do so. Other CBs, such as a fabricated claim, will instead always give the ruler direct control over the war target title. After that first conquest, the game encourages players to go their own way and have some fun. Many new players begin by fabricating claims to take over the rest of Ireland bit by bit, county by county, one by one. In so doing, they miss out on another option, developing further de jure claims to expand more quickly. By the time you control 7 Irish counties, the game gives you the choice to create the Kingdom of Ireland. One major reason to do this, other than the stylish new crown, is that being king gives you de jure claims on all the remaining independent counties and duchies of Ireland. You can use these in wars with the de jure CB, but you can also use these legal relationships to vassalize the remaining Irish counts peacefully. Before creating the Kingdom of Ireland, some counts would be unwilling to vassalize to you because of this 15-point penalty. He is not de jure your vassal. But while holding a title above him in the title tree, in this case the Kingdom of Ireland, you instead get a plus 15-point bonus. He is your de jure vassal. Why is that? To better understand what this means, let's briefly return to the story of Tom and Roger. Suppose Tom convinces Roger that the house is indeed his. After all, Tom's name is right there. Roger takes down the Pantera poster and relocates to the front lawn. But this, of course, doesn't solve the dispute. Tom's front lawn is a part of Tom's home, as are the kitchen, the bedrooms, and the backyard. De jure, all of these parts are what makes up Tom's home. We can think of Ireland's various counties and duchies as the various rooms and closets of Tom's home. Legally speaking, Ireland just is its constituent parts. Ordering around the Earl of Ulster as King of Ireland is just like Tom telling Roger to leave his property. Now let me bring out a tool I've shown in other videos, the title pyramid. I've used this previously to explore how realms become independent of one another, but we can also use it to understand the de jure relationships between titles. I've said previously that in CK, every title in this pyramid must be ruled by one above it or instead be independent. Let me now add to that. Every title in this pyramid is de jure ruled by one above it, and de jure rules those below it. Indeed, every title in this game has at least one barony, county, duchy, kingdom, and emperor level title that relates to it by legal right, even if not in your playthrough's actual fact. What's now on the screen is a complete title pyramid for the Kingdom of Ireland title. You'll see that Ireland is composed of, in a de jure analysis, 5 duchies, and these 5 duchies are in turn composed of 2 or 3 counties each, which are made up of various baronies. Thus, the Kingdom of Ireland de jure controls 5 ducal titles and 12 counties and attendant baronies. Anyone who holds the King of Ireland title will have de jure claims on all of the rest of Ireland, no matter who owns it. We can take a further step back and see that the Kingdom of Ireland title pyramid fits into an even larger de jure title pyramid, that of the Empire of Britannia. Anyone who holds that title would have a de jure claim on the various constituent kingdoms and all their constituent duchies and counties. But remember, this is only a de jure analysis, a presentation of the way things should be legally. It's likely, perhaps even certain, that in your own playthroughs, title holders, including you, will wind up holding land they shouldn't on the de jure analysis. For example, though the county of Erie de jure belongs to the King of Wales, it's easy enough to imagine a greedy King of Ireland, that is you, snagging it. There are 2 easy in-game ways to figure out how de jure titles link into one another. One is using the game's earlier mentioned map modes. Here, by switching through the map modes, we can see that this county, Kent, is rightfully ruled by the Duchy of Kent in the Kingdom of England in the Empire of Britannia. And this county, Hughes, is by law part of the Duchy of Visegrad in the Kingdom of Hungary in the Empire of Carpathia, and so on. As these ideal title relationships aren't always easy to compare to your current game map, it can be easier to find de jure title relationships on each title's title page, reached by clicking on the respective insignia icons. This page shows at its top the title's de jure lieges, even those that have not yet been created. The main body of this page shows the titles that belong de jure to the current title, along with a handy listing of how they're held de facto. Now, to return to an earlier theme, when concluding the Tom and Roger example, I noted that any claim of legality requires an assertion of sovereign power. Someone's got to set and then to enforce the law. Where do de jure relationships come from in the CK3 world? There are 2 answers to that question. First, Paradox has set an initial de jure pyramid for all titles when the game begins. This is what initially displays in the game's various map modes. In this respect, surprise surprise, Paradox is the legislating power. This, though, is not the whole story. Crusader Kings' game world is one of flux. As such, de jure relationships may also change over time, though only very slowly. This is a concept called Jure Drift, and it's not explicated in the game in a way that new players would even know to look for it. The way Jure Drift works is if a ruler de facto controls the land of a lower title for 100 years without also holding the de jure title to which the land should belong, the lower title will shift from the latter title to the former one. This mechanic works only on the relationships between empires and kingdoms, as well as those between kingdoms and duchies. Counties and baronies do not drift. On these relationships, Paradox is now and forever the law. Here's an example of what I mean. Suppose the King of Ireland captures the Duchy of Gwynedd, which de jure belongs to the King of Wales. So long as the King of Ireland does not also become the titular King of Wales, in 100 years' time, the Duchy of Gwynedd will become de jure part of the Kingdom of Ireland. Here, the ruler's own sovereign ability, the power to use violence to control land, supersedes Paradox's initial law-giving. De Jure Drift can be used to make vassals happier and to bring greater stability to realms in the long term. 100 years, though, is a very long time. Players can speed up this lengthy drift timer a tiny bit with their Chancellor's third job, Integrate Title. It'll still take decades, though. With all that said, de jure relationships enter into the game in ways other than as CBs and as reasons for vassalization. Two key ways can be seen in how rulers relate to their vassals. If a character is ruled by someone who is not their rightful liege, that is, someone whose title is not above them in the de jure title pyramid, they'll have a negative 5-point opinion penalty. More distressingly, they'll give a smaller portion of taxes and troops to their liege than they otherwise would. Here, on this character's feudal contract, we can see their contributions are halved because the player is not their rightful liege. This is a huge penalty and a substantial encouragement for players to obtain, create, and distribute titles that would make the de jure structure of sovereignty the de facto one too. One last thing, you might be wondering, how did Tom and Roger settle their land dispute? Who really should live in the house? On that, de jure is still out. If this video helped you and you found it interesting, I'd sure appreciate your subscribing, leaving a like, or giving me a note in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you again real soon.